All right, today we're going to be creating the second side of our types of sources foldable. So we already worked on the primary sources side, so today we're going to add the secondary sources. You're going to set this up just the same way we did with the primary sources. So on the front, we'll label secondary sources. And remember, secondary sources are second-hand accounts. Okay, that means the person providing this source was not actually there at the event. They were second-hand, which means they got the information from someone or somewhere else. Okay, so when we open up our flap, we're going to write our definition of what a secondary source is. It's the description of an event based on research or told by someone who was not there to see it. Okay, so that means if you are writing a paper about Alexander Graham Bell, okay, you have to do some research about him to be able to write that paper or do that project. Okay, you were not around when Alexander Graham Bell was around. Okay, so you have to do research because you were not there. Okay, so that makes it a secondary source. It means you're getting your information from somewhere else before you are doing a project, writing a paper, writing a book, whatever it happens to be. Okay, and some types of secondary sources, I've started the list for you. You can certainly add more to it because these are not the only types. Textbooks are secondary sources. Biographies are secondary sources. Remember we talked when we did primary sources about an autobiography. That means you yourself are writing a book about yourself. If it is a biography, it means someone else is writing that book about you. Okay? Informational books are secondary sources. You can typically tell books are secondary sources because they'll use words like he, she, and they. Okay, means they're talking about other people, they're not talking about themselves. Now, one thing I do want you guys to add down to the bottom then when you are finished with both of your flaps is a way to tell if something is a primary source or a secondary source. Because there are some things that could fall into either category. Okay, so you want to ask yourself, was the person telling the account present at the event? That means, were they there? Okay, an example is a newspaper or a magazine article. Sometimes the newspaper article or the magazine article is written by someone who was there. So in that case, it is a primary source. Sometimes that newspaper or magazine article is written by someone who was not at the event. They have interviewed people or they've done some research on their own in order to write that article. So that would make it a secondary source. Same is true for paintings. Okay, there are paintings from our past that are showing us scenes of wars or scenes with certain presidents in them. Okay, so you have to take a look at when was that painting painted. Was it painted by someone who was present at, say, that battle? If they were, then it's a primary source. If the painting of a particular battle scene was not painted by someone who was at that actual battle, then it's a secondary source. Okay, so keep in mind some types of sources can fall into either primary or secondary. So don't forget this bottom part because that's very helpful in trying to figure out if a source is primary or secondary. Okay, so that's how you will finish up your types of sources foldable today.